Welcome to Unresolved Crime Files. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most shocking cases in the history of modern American crime. A chilling story of betrayal, envy, and the darkness hidden beneath a flawless exterior. But before we begin, if you're a fan of gripping cases, unsolved mysteries, and want to join us in exploring the darkest corners of the criminal mind, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. Your support is what drives us to keep bringing you the most terrifying and authentic stories. All set? Good. Because right now, we're about to step into the world of numbers, balance sheets, and a murderer disguised in a sharp business suit. This is the case of the brutal accountant, a crime that shook Wall Street and the entire nation. The first glimmers of dawn, cold and indifferent, struggled to penetrate the towering canyons of glass and steel that defined Manhattan's financial district. Inside the pristine, temperature-controlled offices of Sterling and Finch, a venerable accounting firm nestled high in a gleaming skyscraper, the only sound was the hum of servers and the gentle sigh of the ventilation system. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, an hour and 13 minutes before the official start of the workday, when the silence was brutally shattered. Helen Albright, the firm's indefatigable senior administrative assistant, prided herself on her punctuality. She was always the first to arrive, switching on the lights, brewing the first pot of coffee, and ensuring the day began with the same meticulous order that Sterling and Finch clients expected from their financial statements. This morning, however, her ritual was disrupted. As she stepped off the private elevator onto the 47th floor, a faint, metallic tang pricked the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible over the clean scent of industrial-grade disinfectant that usually permeated the hallways, but it was there a whisper of something fundamentally wrong. Helen dismissed it as her imagination, perhaps a new cleaning product. She began her routine, navigating the labyrinthine corridors towards the central common area. But as she rounded the corner leading to the executive offices, her eyes fixed on a detail that stopped her cold. The door to Eleanor Vance's office, usually closed until the sharp, ambitious accountant arrived at 7:30 a.m. on the dot, was slightly ajar. A thin sliver of light, almost an unnatural glow, seeped from within. Hesitantly, Helen pushed the door open further. The office was, as always, immaculate. Eleanor Vance, Sterling and Finch's rising star, was legendary for her organizational prowess. Every pen, every file, every meticulously color-coded binder had its designated place. But Eleanor herself was out of place. She was seated at her expansive mahogany desk, her head bowed as if in thought, her dark hair falling across her face. Her hands, usually poised over a keyboard or gripping a designer pen, lay limply on the polished surface. Her tailored gray suit was uncreased, her pearl necklace perfectly aligned. It took Helen a full 5 seconds to process the grotesque truth. The crimson stain blooming like a macabre flower on the white silk blouse beneath Eleanor's blazer, spreading outwards from her chest. The faint, metallic tang Helen had noticed earlier now roared in her nostrils, raw and undeniable. A silent scream tore through Helen's throat, unheard in the cavernous office. She stumbled backward, bumping into the doorframe, her mind refusing to reconcile the image before her with the vibrant, promising young woman she had known. Eleanor Vance, the woman poised to make partner by year-end, was undeniably, horrifyingly dead. Within minutes, the building was a hive of controlled chaos. Security, then paramedics, then finally the NYPD. Detective Isabella Morales, known to her colleagues as Izzy, arrived on the scene with the rising sun. A seasoned veteran of the major case squad, Izzy carried the weary resignation of someone who had seen humanity's darkest corners, yet still harbored a fierce belief in justice. The Sterling and Finch offices were a world away from the gritty alleyways and dilapidated apartments that usually formed her crime scenes. This was a realm of polished surfaces, hushed tones, and implied power. The air conditioning hummed, circulating the scent of expensive coffee and, less subtly now, blood. Detective Morales? Captain Miller greeted her, his face grim. Welcome to the corporate jungle. Victims Eleanor Vance, 32. Senior accountant. Found by the admin assistant, Helen Albright, just before 7. Izzy nodded, her eyes already scanning. Any signs of forced entry? Miller shook his head. None. Building security is airtight. Keycard access only to this floor, cameras everywhere. No unusual activity logged on the system. Izzy moved into Eleanor's office, her movements fluid and purposeful. The crime scene techs were already at work, their flashlights dancing over surfaces, their cameras clicking. Eleanor sat upright, almost serene at her desk. The wound was a single, clean puncture to the heart. No struggle, no overturned chairs, no scattered papers. The desk blotter was pristine. A half-empty mug of still-warm herbal tea sat beside a tablet displaying a complex spreadsheet. Everything was in its place. Too much in its place. This is surgically precise, Izzy murmured, circling the desk. No defensive wounds. No struggle. Someone she knew, or someone who surprised her completely. The weapon's gone, one of the techs reported. Looks like a thin blade, maybe a stiletto or an ice pick. Clean entry, minimal spatter. Izzy knelt, examining the floor, the desk legs. No prints. Not yet, detective. Every surface here is wiped clean, or gloved, or both. This guy knows what he's doing. Or she, Izzy corrected instinctively. The meticulousness, the precision, the absolute lack of mess, it spoke volumes. This wasn't a crime of passion or a hurried robbery. This was planned. Executed. With chilling calm, her gaze drifted to the row of framed awards on Eleanor's credenza. Top performer, rising star, excellence in client relations. Eleanor Vance was clearly at the top of her game. Anyone else here yet? A few of the senior partners, the firm's legal counsel, and HR, Miller replied. They're all in the conference room, looking like they've seen a ghost. And not the good kind. I'll talk to them soon. First, I want to see the firm's structure. Who had access? Who had a motive? And what was Eleanor working on? As the morning progressed, the 47th floor became a tableau of hushed horror. Employees, arriving to find their offices a crime scene, were ushered into other parts of the building. Their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. Many wept openly. Others stood frozen, staring at the tape that now cordoned off the executive wing. Among them was Arthur Finch. Arthur, a senior accountant in a different division, was a man who blended seamlessly into the background. Medium height, receding hairline, perfectly pressed suit. He moved with a quiet efficiency, almost ghost-like, through the stunned crowds. He offered condolences in a low, somber voice, his eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, reflecting a carefully controlled sorrow. Terrible, simply terrible, he murmured to a colleague, shaking his head slowly. Eleanor was such a talent, a real loss for the firm. Internally, however, Arthur was a tempest of controlled exhilaration. His heart, usually a steady metronome, beat with a quickened, almost imperceptible rhythm of triumph. He observed Detective Morales from a distance, noting her sharp gaze, her confident posture. She was good, he surmised, but not good enough. He had accounted for everything, every variable, every contingency. He had arrived at 5 a.m. using his master keycard. He had deactivated the specific camera feed to Eleanor's office for precisely 12 minutes, a pre-programmed blind spot he discovered months ago during a system audit. He wore surgical gloves and shoe covers, meticulously placed before entering the building and removed after, disposed of in a public waste bin blocks away. The weapon, a custom-sharpened letter opener from his own collection, had been cleaned with industrial alcohol and then broken down, its pieces tossed into different sewer grates across the city. The slight metallic tang Helen Albright had noticed? That was the residue of the cleaning agents, not the blood itself. And Eleanor's body, upright, composed, a final, chilling act of control, ensuring the scene conveyed a sense of order, almost a farewell, rather than a violent struggle. Arthur walked into the conference room where Captain Miller was gathering employees. He sat quietly, observing, listening. He knew the questions they would ask. Alibis, relationships, grudges. He had an airtight alibi, a late-night work session at home, meticulously logged on his personal computer, backed by a fabricated email exchange with a client in a different time zone. No one would question the dedication of Arthur Finch, the man who lived for his spreadsheets. Izzy, meanwhile, had begun her initial interviews. Helen Albright, still visibly shaken, recounted her horrifying discovery. Eleanor's assistant, Mark Jenkins, a nervous young man, spoke of Eleanor's relentless work ethic but couldn't recall any specific threats or enemies. She was focused on her work, detective, Mark stammered. Always. She was about to land a huge new client, a tech startup called Nexus Solutions. It was a big deal, a real coup for the firm. Nexus Solutions. Izzy filed that away. High stakes. Competition. She then spoke with the senior partners, a phalanx of polished men and women whose concerns seemed genuine, but whose primary focus was clearly on damage control for the firm's reputation. Eleanor Vance was an invaluable asset, declared Mr. Sterling, the firm's patriarch, his voice raspy with thinly veiled anxiety. Her integrity was beyond reproach. We simply cannot fathom who would do this. Integrity beyond reproach. Izzy heard that phrase often in cases involving highflyers. It usually meant there was a secret. Everyone had secrets. As the day wore on, Izzy kept returning to the scene. The lack of struggle, the precision. It wasn't about rage. It was about execution. This wasn't an external threat, a disgruntled client, or a random act of violence. This was internal, intimate, calculated. She asked for the firm's floor plans, security logs, employee directories, and detailed financial records for Eleanor's current and past projects. She also requested a full list of all employees with access to the 47th floor outside of regular business hours, and their keycard swipe data. Back at her precinct, Izzy stared at the photos of Eleanor's office. The victim was perfect, the office was perfect, the crime was perfect. Too perfect. Something felt wrong. An invisible thread. Her eyes scanned the image of Eleanor's desk one last time. The tablet, the spreadsheet, the half-empty mug of tea. And then she saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible smudge on the rim of the mug. A tiny discrepancy that wouldn't show up in any routine analysis. It was a fingerprint, partially obscured, as if someone had hastily wiped it, but not perfectly. A human touch, a momentary lapse in an otherwise flawless performance. Eleanor Vance hadn't arrived early. Someone else had. Someone who had offered her a cup of tea, or perhaps sat with her, before delivering the killing blow. Someone who had then tried to erase their presence, but missed one tiny, crucial detail. Izzy picked up her phone. Miller, get me everything you have on Eleanor Vance's last few days. Every meeting, every call, every email. And get me a full list of everyone who was in the building between 5 a.m. and 6:45 a.m. today, regardless of their official start time. I want names. I want faces. And I want the forensics team back at that office. There's a print on that tea mug. I have a feeling our killer isn't as perfect as they think they are. Deep in his own quiet cubicle, several floors down, Arthur Finch was meticulously balancing a client's quarterly report. His hands were steady, his mind calm. He smiled faintly. They would find nothing. His world was, once again, perfectly in order. The only imperfection had been Eleanor Vance, and now she was just another entry in a closed ledger. Weeks bled into months, and the shock of Eleanor Vance's murder at Sterling and Finch slowly transmuted into a simmering frustration. The initial media frenzy, fueled by the sensational Wall Street whodunit narrative, had receded into the background noise of true crime podcasts and investigative documentaries. Yet, for Detective Isabella Morales, the case remained an open wound, festering with unanswered questions. The seemingly perfect nature of the crime continued to baffle the department, and the pressure from Captain Miller and the mayor's office was mounting. Izzy had chased every lead. The fingerprint on the tea mug had been too smudged to yield a positive match, a frustrating near-miss that only reinforced her belief in the killer's meticulous nature. Eleanor's personal life had been scrutinized. A string of respectable but uncommitted relationships, no scorned lovers. Her professional life, while competitive, showed no overt enemies or threats. The Nexus Solutions deal, initially a potential motive, turned out to be a clean negotiation. Everything was ordinary, except for the brutal murder at its center. "We're hitting a wall, Izzy," Captain Miller had declared in their last weekly briefing, his voice edged with weariness. "The governor is asking for updates. The partners at SNF are demanding answers. And we've got nothing. No weapon, no clear prints, no witnesses, no motive that sticks. You still think it's an inside job?" "Absolutely, Captain," Izzy had responded without hesitation. The precision, the lack of forced entry, the cleanliness of the scene, it screams internal. Someone who knew the building, the security systems, and Eleanor's routine intimately. Someone who wanted it to look like it wasn't an inside job. Izzy had pored over the keycard swipe data for the 47th floor. Scores of employees had accessed the floor over the years. Dozens had keycard access. But only a handful, including Arthur Finch, had logged in before 7 a.m. on the morning of the murder. Arthur's alibi, a detailed account of working from home on a critical client report due for a European client, was supported by email timestamps and VPN logs. It was ironclad. Too ironclad. Arthur Finch, in the weeks following the murder, had become a quiet pillar of stability at Sterling and Finch. He volunteered to help reorganize Eleanor's client portfolios, offering his meticulous expertise. He was always available, always calm, always perfectly composed. He would often approach Izzy's team during their visits, offering insights into the firm's operational structure or speculating, in a detached, analytical way, about potential motives. He suggested disgruntled clients, a possible leak of sensitive financial data, even a radical eco-terrorist group targeting the firm's investments. He was helpful, almost excessively so. Izzy had observed him. He was unremarkable in every way, which, ironically, made him remarkable. His eyes, behind those thin glasses, held no discernible emotion, no flicker of nervousness, no overt sorrow. Just a quiet, almost serene blankness. She found herself watching him in the lunchroom, in the hallways. He was a creature of habit, moving with the rhythmic predictability of a perfectly tuned machine. One afternoon, while reviewing Eleanor's historical client files, Izzy noticed something that initially seemed trivial. Eleanor, known for her impeccable financial hygiene, had a single, minor inconsistency in a report from 2 years prior, a discrepancy of a few $1,000s in a charitable foundation's audit. It had been swiftly corrected, marked as a clerical error, by a colleague and signed off. But Eleanor, Izzy knew, didn't make clerical errors. And the colleague who signed it off? Arthur Finch. The amount was too small to be a motive for murder. But it was a crack in the pristine facade. Izzy pulled the full audit report. Arthur Finch had indeed reviewed and approved the correction. But the original error, a misallocation of funds to an obscure shell corporation, was unusual. It hinted at something more deliberate than a mistake. She decided to dig deeper into Arthur Finch. His background was as unremarkable as his presence. Grew up in a quiet suburban town, top of his class in accounting, stellar references. No criminal record, no disciplinary actions. A life as clean as his spreadsheets. Yet, the small financial anomaly, the clerical error, nagged at her. Why would Eleanor, a perfectionist, overlook it? And why would Arthur, another perfectionist, simply sign off on it without deeper scrutiny? Izzy requested a complete review of all audit reports Arthur Finch had ever corrected or signed off on for colleagues. It was a Herculean task, but she had a hunch. She assigned her most detail-oriented junior detective, Miller, to the task. Meanwhile, Arthur Finch was in his element. The void left by Eleanor's death had created opportunities. He was now handling several of her key accounts, including Nexus Solutions, which he'd successfully closed. His confidence, always meticulously contained, was growing. He found himself relishing the small, almost imperceptible shifts in power dynamics, the increased deference from junior staff, the subtle nods of approval from senior partners who now saw him as a steady hand in troubled waters. He had often thought of Eleanor as a gaudy, irritating splash of color in his perfectly monochromatic world. her effortless charm, her quick assent, her vivacious laughter echoing through the usually subdued halls it had grated on him. He, Arthur Finch, with his decades of quiet dedication, his flawless track record, his superior intellect, was consistently overlooked for the flashier, more charismatic Eleanor. She represented everything he despised. Superficiality rewarded over substance. The clerical error from 2 years ago had been one of his earliest, most subtle experiments. A small, untraceable siphoning of funds from a client's inactive account into a ghost account he controlled, then slowly laundered out through a series of complex transactions. It was a game, a proof of concept. He wanted to see if he could do it, if he could manipulate the system right under everyone's noses. Eleanor, at the time, was a junior auditor on the project. She had almost caught it. He remembered the cold dread when she'd flagged the anomaly in a preliminary report. He'd swiftly intervened, using his senior status to help her correct the error, subtly guiding her to misattribute it to a faulty algorithm rather than a deliberate act. He had even been the one to sign off on the correction, sealing the obfuscation. Eleanor, trusting and new, had accepted his explanation. But the seed of resentment had been planted. Eleanor, unknowingly, had come close to exposing his quiet, intellectual rebellion against the system. And he couldn't have that. His perfection was paramount. As Eleanor's star rose, Arthur's quiet resentment festered. He saw her as a threat, not just to his professional standing, but to his very existence as the master of his own intricate game. She was too observant, too thorough, too close to the subtle financial manipulations he occasionally engaged in, not for greed, but for the sheer intellectual pleasure of outsmarting the system. The Nexus Solutions deal, a client he had secretly courted and believed was his, only to see Eleanor snatch it with her charm, was the final straw. She had become an obstacle, a loose end that needed to be tied permanently. Then came the call from Detective Miller. "Detective Morales, you need to see this." Izzy rushed to the precinct. Miller, bleary-eyed from days of sifting through digital ledgers, pointed to a screen. "Arthur Finch, detective. He didn't just correct that one report for Eleanor. He's been involved in correcting similar clerical errors on at least 7 other accounts over the past 5 years. All minor, all involving small, untraceable sums, and all flagged by junior auditors who then had their reports reviewed and corrected by Finch." Izzy's mind raced. 7 instances. Small amounts. Untraceable. He wasn't stealing for profit, was he? He was testing the system, proving he could. And these junior auditors, what happened to them? All moved on to other departments, or left the firm, Miller reported. Except for Eleanor. She was still here, still rising, and she was the only one who had truly flagged his corrections as unusual, even if she didn't fully understand them at the time. She just accepted his seniority. Izzy stared at the data. This wasn't about money. This was about control. About intellectual arrogance. About someone who saw themselves as a grand chess master, manipulating the pieces around him. Eleanor, the bright, successful, and unknowingly tenacious auditor, had been too close to his carefully constructed world of subtle deceptions. She wasn't just a rival. She was a potential witness to his quiet, brilliant subversions. The motive clicked into place, chilling and insidious. It wasn't rage or a love triangle. It was the quiet, calculated fury of a narcissist whose perfect world was threatened. Eleanor Vance, in her earnest pursuit of truth and order, had become a loose thread in Arthur Finch's meticulously woven tapestry of control. "Get me a warrant for Arthur Finch's office and home," Izzy commanded, her voice sharp with renewed purpose. "Every hard drive, every external device, every single piece of paper. I want to see how perfect he really is." The game was far from over, but Izzy finally had her player, and the ledger, once seemingly flawless, was beginning to show its ugly, bloody cracks. The air in the interrogation room was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unspoken tension. Across the scarred metallic table, Detective Isabella Morales fixed her gaze on Arthur Finch. He sat, as always, meticulously composed, his hands clasped neatly on the table, his eyes placid behind his glasses. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a man who believed in the power of presentation, even in the face of accusation. Izzy had given him ample time to settle, to feel the weight of the silence, to contemplate the walls of the room that offered no escape. Her team had executed the search warrants with clinical precision, but Arthur's home and office were as immaculate as Eleanor Vance's crime scene. No weapon, no incriminating notes, no frantic internet searches. Just the organized chaos of an accountant's life, every document filed, every digital record cataloged. "Mr. Finch," Izzy began, her voice calm, almost conversational. "We've been through your records. Impressive. Every decimal point accounted for." Arthur offered a small, polite smile. "I pride myself on my work, detective. Accuracy is paramount in my profession." "Indeed," Izzy agreed, leaning forward slightly. "And it seems you're just as meticulous in other aspects of your life. Your alibi, for instance, for the morning of Eleanor Vance's murder. Airtight, isn't it? Working from home, connecting to the firm's VPN, sending emails to a client in Singapore. All perfectly logged." "I was working," Arthur stated simply. "As I told you, deadlines, detective. They don't wait for tragedy." "No, they don't," Izzy conceded. "But tell me, Mr. Finch, when you corrected those clerical errors in the Charitable Foundation audit 2 years ago, the one Eleanor Vance was working on, did you also do that from home?" Arthur's composure wavered for a fraction of a second, a flicker in his eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. Then it was gone. "That was a standard procedure, detective. A minor misallocation, easily rectified. Eleanor was new to the complexities of that particular client. I simply provided guidance." "Guidance?" Izzy repeated, her tone flat. "Funny, because guidance from you seems to be a common theme. We found 7 other instances over the past 5 years where junior auditors flagged minor financial discrepancies, all involving small, untraceable sums, all later corrected and signed off by you. And curiously, those junior auditors all either left the firm or were transferred shortly after." Arthur's hands remained clasped, but Izzy noticed the faint tremor in his knuckles. "Detective, I am a senior professional. It is my responsibility to ensure the firm's reports are flawless. Errors happen. I merely ensured they were rectified efficiently and discreetly to protect the firm's reputation." "Discreetly," Izzy mused, "or so no one would ask too many questions. Questions about why these errors always involved funds disappearing into shell corporations. Questions about why you, a man who claims to pride himself on accuracy, seem to be the common denominator in a series of conveniently corrected financial anomalies." She pushed a stack of files across the table, printouts of the audit reports, highlighting Arthur's signature. "This isn't about stealing money, is it, Mr. Finch? The amounts were too small, too insignificant for a man of your ambition. This was about something else. This was about proving you could do it. Proving you were smarter than everyone else. Testing the limits of the system, just for the intellectual thrill." Arthur's gaze finally lifted, meeting hers. There was a subtle shift in his demeanor now, a cold, almost detached amusement replacing the feigned politeness. "A fascinating theory, detective. One that lacks any material evidence of wrongdoing, let alone a motive for murder. The motive, Mr. Finch, is the most chilling part," Izzy countered, her voice dropping. "Eleanor Vance was smart. She was meticulous. She might have trusted you then, but she was growing. She was getting closer to understanding the true nature of those clerical errors. Maybe she was about to unearth one of your little experiments. And to you, Arthur, that was an unacceptable risk. She was a loose end in your perfectly constructed world." A faint smile touched Arthur's lips, devoid of warmth. "Loose ends are untidy, detective, and I detest untidiness." Izzy felt a chill creep up her spine. This wasn't just a confession. It was an affirmation of a terrifying internal logic. "You saw her as a threat to your perceived superiority, didn't you? Her rapid ascent, her effortless charm, her ability to secure clients like Nexus Solutions, clients you believed were yours by right. It grated on you. She, with her human imperfections and social graces, was eclipsing you, the meticulous, brilliant number cruncher who pulled the strings behind the scenes. Arthur finally leaned back, a genuine, unsettling calm settling over him. He lowered his voice, almost as if sharing a secret. Eleanor Vance was a variable, an unpredictable element in a system I had painstakingly designed for absolute control. She was naive. She saw the world in black and white, debits and credits. She wouldn't have understood the artistry, the sheer elegance, of manipulating the gray areas. He paused, his eyes gleaming with a strange, dark pride. And the Nexus Solutions account? That was a masterpiece. I had cultivated that relationship for months, only to have it handed to her simply because she could charm them. Charm, detective, is an illusion. Numbers are truth. I merely reasserted the truth. So you killed her, Izzy stated, not as a question, but as a plain fact. You offered her tea, sat with her, and then, with that same surgical precision you applied to your spreadsheets, you ended her life. All because she threatened your ego, your sense of control. Arthur sighed, a sound of mild exasperation. It wasn't personal, detective. It was corrective action. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, figuratively speaking. She was getting too close. My system cannot tolerate critical vulnerabilities. Izzy watched him, horrified by the cold, calculating logic of a man who viewed human life as a balance sheet entry. The camera feed you disabled for 12 minutes? The pre-programmed blind spot you found during an audit? The custom-sharpened letter opener you broke down and scattered across the city? You left no trace, did you? You thought you were perfect. Arthur's smile widened, revealing a chilling glint of triumph. Almost detective, almost perfect. That smudge on the mug. A small oversight, a momentary lapse in an otherwise flawless execution. You are good, I grant you that. Most would have missed it entirely. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. But you see, detective, even with that minuscule imperfection, you still lack the weapon. You lack the definitive forensic link. You have my word, a confession you cannot use without corroborating evidence, and a series of clerical errors that, while intriguing, are hardly proof of murder. Izzy felt a surge of rage, but kept her voice steady. You're right, Arthur. We don't have the weapon. We don't have the definitive forensic link yet. But we have the motive, the pattern, your access, your demeanor, and now, your confession. Every single piece of your perfect alibi, your carefully constructed life, will be dismantled. Every one of those clerical errors will be re-audited, not by a junior accountant, but by federal investigators looking for a pattern of financial manipulation. And the one piece of evidence you thought you erased, the small, almost imperceptible smudge on the tea mug, will go back. We'll reprocess it. And with every new piece of technology, every new database, we will find that match, Arthur. Because eventually every ledger balances. And every lie has a paper trail. Arthur's smirk faltered. The quiet arrogance began to chip away, revealing a hint of something resembling fear. He had been so certain of his victory, so convinced of his intellectual superiority. You won't get away with this, Arthur, Izzy stated, rising from her chair, because you made one critical mistake. You underestimated the human element. You thought a life was just another number you could erase. But Eleanor Vance was more than a number. And we will make sure her ledger is balanced, even if it means exposing every single dark, calculated secret you've hidden within your perfect spreadsheets. As the interrogation ended, and Arthur Finch was led away to be officially charged, his carefully constructed world began its inevitable collapse. The news of the accountant assassin spread like wildfire, captivating a nation once again with the chilling story of a meticulously planned murder fueled by envy and a perverse need for control. The once unremarkable Arthur Finch was now etched into the annals of crime, not as a brilliant accountant, but as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who blend seamlessly into the perfectly ordered world around us. The case of Arthur Finch left a deep scar on the public, a chilling reminder that the darkest corners of the human soul can hide beneath the most ordinary facade. This story is truly a warning about the dangers of unchecked envy and the insatiable need for control. If you enjoyed the story and want to uncover more haunting cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. See you in the next episode of Unresolved Crime Files.